Just before people die, there's an interesting universal phenomenon that happens. Medical professionals and hospice caregivers report that, in their final moments, many people call out to loved ones, frequently their mother, children, siblings, or partner, sometimes even requesting to see them one last time. They call out the words, "mommy" or "mama," even see and reach for their loved ones, even the ones who have already passed away. The deathbed even becomes a moment for expressions of love or forgiveness. So, why are relationships with our loved ones so important that there is a high likelihood we will dedicate our final moments, even our last breath, to them? The question seems almost rhetorical, since it feels self-evident that our close connections matter deeply. But why is this truly the case? We can look at that from different perspectives, such as evolutionary, psychological, existential, cultural, spiritual, and many more, but in this video, I'll describe some phenomena that could explain the interesting reasons behind the importance of relationships. American Psychological Association's Dictionary of Psychology defines interpersonal relations as the connections and interactions, especially ones that are socially and emotionally significant, between two or more people. And by relationship, I don't mean just romantic ones. They are of course important, but before that we have to first form healthy relationships with primary family and friends. Those relationships actually prepare us for the romantic ones by providing us with the opportunity to develop essential social skills, such as intimacy, self-disclosure, compromise, and cooperation, which we later need in order to build and sustain a healthy romantic relationship. We cannot begin with the development of our species alone. We must go back several 100 million years to find the fundamental reason that set this entire mechanism in motion. So the first question is, why are living beings programmed in such a way that, from the very beginning of life, relationships matter so deeply to us and survival without them becomes extremely difficult? This is not true only for humans, but for many other living species as well, and it all began roughly 500 million years ago. Around 400 to 500 million years ago, early vertebrates, such as fish, amphibians, and reptiles, already began showing group behaviors that provided safety in numbers, because they were much safer in a group when the predator showed up to eat them. Around 60 to 70 million years ago, sociality became more sophisticated in mammals, especially in primates, where grooming, alliances, and group hierarchies became central. Around 2 to 3 million years ago, early humans relied heavily on cooperation for hunting, sharing food, and raising children, making social bonds crucial for survival. Today, humans are considered ultrasocial species. We heavily rely on communication and cooperation. Grouping and therefore relationships are important for the following reasons. Animals in groups had a higher chance of survival than solitary ones. Living in groups improved vigilance and defense. Cooperation increased efficiency in finding and defending food. Social bonds also increased the likelihood of finding mates and thus ensuring that genes were successfully passed on. Living in groups enabled imitation, teaching, and cultural learning, which improved adaptation to changing environments. One could easily just pass the accumulated knowledge to the next generation, thus creating a larger pool of skills and knowledge for every new generation. Social connections can also reduce stress hormones and increase well-being, which supports health and longevity, not only in humans, but also, for example, elephants and dolphins. Now we address the why, but let's focus on the how. How do we know that relationships are so important to humans, and how do they affect our well-being, physical health, longevity, and so on? For that, we can turn to the Harvard study of adult development. The year is 1938, and researchers at Harvard want to answer one seemingly simple question. What is the strongest predictor of happiness, health, and longevity? To answer that, they began tracking 268 Harvard sophomore men, including President Kennedy. Women weren't in the original study because the college was still all male. The study expanded and now includes over 1,300 offspring of original participants. Over the years, Researchers have studied the participants' health trajectories and their broader lives, including their triumphs and failures in careers and marriage. They gathered all that data from vast medical records and hundreds of in-person interviews and questionnaires. That's how the Harvard study became one of the world's longest-running studies on adult life and well-being. Main findings. What they found was incredible. They concluded that close relationships, even more than money, fame, social class, IQ, or genes, are the strongest predictors of happiness, health, and longevity. Important relationships include relationships with family, friends, and community. What they also found was that good relationships don't need to be conflict-free. Trust and reliability matter most. Some interesting findings. Relationship satisfaction at age 50 predicts physical health at age 80 better than cholesterol levels. Genetics are less important than midlife relationship satisfaction. But why is that the case? Strong social ties protect against mental and physical decline, improve memory function, and reduce loneliness, which is as harmful as smoking or alcoholism. Marital satisfaction protects mental health, even reducing the emotional impact of physical pain. Those who had unhappy marriages felt both more emotional and physical pain. The scientists also provided a list of protective factors for healthy aging. Those include physical activity, avoiding smoking and excessive alcohol use, healthy coping mechanisms for life's challenges, maintaining a healthy weight, stable marriage. And for inner-city participants, they found an additional factor, which was higher education. What the director of that study wants you to take away from all of this is that tending to relationships is a form of self-care as important as physical health maintenance. For the conclusion of this chapter, I would like to share two powerful quotes. Loneliness kills. It's as powerful as smoking or alcoholism. Robert Waldinger, psychiatrist and the director of the Harvard study. When the study began, nobody cared about empathy or attachment. But the key to healthy aging is relationships, relationships, relationships. George Valiant, psychiatrist. Another argument and example of the importance of relationships is the phenomena of anaclitic depression as described by René Spitz, an Austrian-American psychoanalyst. Spitz researched the consequences of isolation or solitude in infants during the early stages of life. He studied what happens when no one interacts with the baby, when no one gives them love or meets their need for human contact. Spitz observed the development of children who were separated from their mothers at birth and raised in institutions, such as nurseries. During their entire first year of life, these children had only minimal contact with their surroundings. They had no toys and kept themselves occupied only by interacting with themselves. As early as the 1950s, Spitz studied the relationship between mother and child. Now we would say between a parent or a caregiver and a child, but it was believed in those times that a child forms that strong emotional bond only or primarily with their mother. The mother was seen as the central figure for a child's emotional and psychological development. Fathers, on the other hand, were often overlooked or seen as secondary figures. Today, attachment theory and developmental psychology recognize that children can form secure attachments to multiple caregivers, including fathers, grandparents, adoptive parents, preschool teachers, and other caregivers. What Spitz discovered can be described in 3 stages. After 1 to 2 months, the children became unusually agitated and tearful and began to lose appetite and weight. By the 3rd month, signs of anaclitic depression appeared, rejection of contact, lying motionless, insomnia, a frozen facial expression, and slowed motor activity. After 6 months, signs of hospitalism developed, extreme motor and psychological inhibition, delayed speech development, severe weakening of the immune system, such that even mild infections or injuries led to serious complications or even death. The overall effects were devastating. Infants who were socially deprived for at least 5 months suffered severe psychological consequences. They no longer responded to stimuli, became apathetic, developed self-regulation strategies such as repetitive movements, and appeared passive, withdrawn, and absent. Emotional deprivation also affects brain functioning. Brain development and emotional regulation were slowed. Those experiences have a long-lasting negative effect on the person because they are stored in the child's implicit memory and have consequences well into adulthood. Those children might develop the belief that they are helpless, unworthy, and all alone in this world because they have an experience of abandonment in early development. To finish this chapter with a positive, the good news is that the prognosis for recovery was good if the mother returned within 3 months, or if another consistent caregiver stepped in as a substitute. Another example of negative consequences of emotional deprivation comes from Interpersonal Neurobiology by Alan Shore and Daniel Siegel. They state that the mind, brain, and relationships are inseparable and intertwined, forming the triangle of well-being. They affect and shape each other. The authors emphasize that early caregiver-infant relationships influence brain development. Brain plasticity is the brain's ability to change its structure and function by forming new neural connections in response to experience, and thus the brain is constantly being shaped by relationships. Deficits during early periods can lead to developmental disruptions in brain structures. Underdeveloped areas in children lacking contact, attachment, or emotional interaction are usually the regions responsible for emotional regulation and speech. This can also occur in families where parents are emotionally or physically absent. Interpersonal neurobiology connects adverse childhood experiences and trauma to different diagnoses, such as anxiety, depression, dissociative identity disorder, PTSD, and many others. Adverse childhood experiences are potentially traumatic events that occur before the age of 18. They include 3 categories: abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction, such as domestic violence, parental mental illness, or substance abuse, and so on. When that happens, the energy and information flow between different parts of the brain can become disrupted and impaired. This is usually the result disrupted activity of the limbic system, responsible for emotions, and reptilian part of the brain, responsible for basic life functions, which then leads to many different diagnoses. As infants, we need someone who responds to our emotions and help us regulate them. This support gradually enables the child to develop self-regulation and the brain structures, such as the prefrontal cortex, that help regulate the limbic system, which plays a central role in emotions. Siegel highlights that integration, linking differentiated parts of the brain and mind, is the foundation of well-being, and thus mental health problems often reflect disintegration. In short, our earliest relationships quite literally shape our brain. When caregivers are emotionally present and responsive, they provide the foundation for healthy communication, emotional regulation, and integration. But when this support is absent, the brain's development can be disrupted in ways that echo far beyond childhood. This is why early emotional connection is not just comforting, it is essential for building both a healthy mind and a healthy brain. The key takeaway from this chapter is humans are wired for connection. The brain is a social organ. Now we come to the relational needs. I would like to encourage all viewers to write down numbers from 1 to 8 as I will list and briefly describe all 8 core relational needs. As I go through them, I would like you to write down whether this need is satisfied or unmet in your daily relationships. So for each number, just listen carefully and write down the verdict. You can then use the results to better understand what you crave in a relationship or to openly communicate it to your loved ones. You can even create plans and ideas how you can satisfy each other's needs. And be sure to talk about it in the comment section. You might just help someone who is in the same situation as you are. And what I would like to highlight is that relational needs aren't only applicable to romantic relationships, but to all relationships, including parents or caregivers, friends, and wider family. Clinical psychologist and psychotherapist Richard Erskine identified 8 relational needs. The need for security or safety. The need for safety, in the context of a relationship, means to be who we truly are and to know it is okay to be just that. We need a safe space where we can truly be ourselves, where we can express and be ourselves without the fear of rejection or disrespect from the other person. Our vulnerability has to be valued, protected, and respected. So what that means is that in every relationship, we are eventually vulnerable because of self-expression, intimacy, or other important elements of a relationship. In a secure relationship, we can be vulnerable because we know that we won't get attacked or humiliated when we express ourselves, our emotions, open up to someone, or make mistakes. We naturally do not want to feel shame. That's an uncomfortable emotion, so we don't want to be attacked or criticized if we, for example, make a mistake. And when we know that won't happen, that's when we know that we are in a psychologically secure relationship. 2. The need to feel validated, affirmed, and significant within a relationship. It is a form of validation, a confirmation that someone matters in the relationship. It is the feeling that you are worthy and respected with all your emotions, thoughts, and reasoning for your behavior. So, what that means is that when you do something, others understand and respect your actions as something that has been done for a reason. Even when someone does something wrong, we believe there was some reason behind their action. 3. The need to be accepted by a stable, dependable, and protective other person. As the name suggests, this one includes the feeling of being respected and taken care of by a dependable, steady, and protective individual. So essentially like a toddler who explores and wanders away but returns to the parents to check if they are still there for them. So it includes that element of being taken care of, not just as a baby, but also later on in life. On the other hand, we also need to take care of someone. So in reality, there is that element of taking turns in caring for each other. You take care of me, and I take care of you. The other element is respect, so essentially accepting the person and helping them find their best path and not criticizing them, but helping them grow. So, to put it shortly, we need a stable person to accept us into their life. 4. The need for confirmation of personal experience and mutuality. This arises from the desire to be understood without having to explain everything. So, when we are expressing our emotions or experiences to someone, we need that person to be able to understand that, either because they have also experienced something similar or they are able to imagine what we are going through. So, we need someone to either relate to us or at least understand us without us trying our hardest to explain our situation or tell the entire story behind it. With that comes the feeling that we and our experience are understood, respected, and accepted. 5. The need for self-definition. Self-definition in a relationship means embracing and expressing our uniqueness and individuality, while the other person recognizes and respects that. This one also includes the need to have your own part in a relationship, which means that you are a distinct entity that can do things on their own. Not everything has to be done together. You can also have your own opinion and disagree with the other person in the relationship. So, what that means is, we should be able to see differences, disagreements, and uniqueness in a relationship as treasure and not as a threat or risk to the relationship. In that sense, we need to accept others' differences and uniqueness and have our own individuality be accepted and respected in a relationship. 6. The need to have or make an impact on the other person. The ability to change or influence another person's thinking or behavior, or to evoke an emotional response in them. And not doing so forcefully, but have it happen naturally because the other person really loves us, respects, and understands our needs. What that means is that we have a need to feel that our reactions have an effect or impact on the other person. For example, not being ignored when we ask or say something. Or, for example, you tell someone that you feel bad when they do something and thus, they stop doing it. You had an effect on their behavior by expressing your emotions. The need to have the other person initiate. This one simply implies that we can feel a great deal of dissatisfaction and pain when we are always required to approach, initiate, and take the lead in the relationship. So you may find yourself in a relationship in which you are always the one to text first or to invite the other person to dinner or suggest to take the next step in the relationship. We need the other person to reach out to us because that shows that they want to be with us, spend time with us, which shows respect, care, and love. 8. The need to express love. In a healthy relationship, we feel warmth, dedication, and appreciation for each other. And there is a need to express that to the other person. So not to deny our experience and love for the other person, but to be able to freely express it. We need to communicate loving feelings to the other person, and that is sometimes denied or not possible in a relationship. 9. An additional one is the need to be loved, to be cared for. This only emerges in a relationship where all the other 8 needs are met. It is expressed through gratitude, emotional expression, and actions for the benefit of the other. Now that we went through all of them, let's talk a little bit about why it is even important to have these needs met and what happens when they are unmet. Humans are sociable creatures, and we have needs that can only be met in relation to other people. We are naturally driven to build relationships with others, and thus we have needs connected directly to relationships. Often the relational needs that were the most consistently unmet when we were younger become the ones that we prioritize the most in adult life. Also, because they can be continuously unmet in adulthood. The emotional intensity of relational needs increases when the need remains unmet. And consequently, we may experience feelings of helplessness, frustration, disempowerment, loneliness, emotional deprivation, and insecurity in our relationships. We may struggle to assert ourselves in relationships or feel overwhelmed by external pressures. This can lead to stress, anxiety, and a diminished sense of self-worth. Consequently, we may struggle to connect with others on a deep emotional level. This can lead to feelings of isolation and dissatisfaction with our relationships and even overall quality of life. Another example and argument I want to provide is the theory of social learning and its importance in early development. The way we learn and develop as humans is strongly connected to relationships. From early childhood, we acquire most knowledge by observing and imitating others, for example, parents, caregivers, peers. Relationships are therefore essential for normal psychological and social development. Social learning theory, developed by Albert Bandura, emphasizes that people learn not only through direct experience, but also by observing others. Learning occurs when individuals watch the behaviors of others. Those are called models. People decide on whether to imitate observed behavior by closely observing the consequences that behavior has for the model. If the consequences are positive, we will likely imitate such behavior, but if they are negative, we will know not to behave in such way, and thus learning from others' mistakes. That way we do not have to experience negative consequences ourselves. It is a win-win situation for the observer. How did Bandura show this theory in action? With the experiment known as the Bobo doll study in 1961. In the experiment, children observed adults interacting with a large inflatable doll. Some adults behaved aggressively, hitting, kicking, shouting at the doll, while others acted non-aggressively. When the children were later given the chance to play with the doll, those who had witnessed aggressive behavior were more likely to imitate it. This showed that learning can occur simply by observing others, without direct reinforcement. Another perspective on the importance of social learning and relationships comes from so-called wolf children or feral children who grew up in isolation from human contact and were sometimes raised among animals. Deprived of normal human relationships, these children imitated animal behaviors, such as walking on all fours or howling, but lacked the ability to develop language, emotional regulation, and social skills. These tragic cases underline the essential role that early human relationships and interaction play in cognitive, emotional, and social development. There are multiple examples of feral children from across the world, for example. Dina, a boy from India, who was raised by wolves and ate raw meat, howled and couldn't speak. Oksana Malaya from Ukraine was raised by dogs for approximately 5 years. She barked, ran on all fours, slept on floor, and ate like a dog. John Sibunya from Uganda was raised by monkeys and copied grooming. He also used sounds often heard from monkeys. The cases of feral children highlight what happens when the relational models are absent. Key aspects of human development cannot unfold. Relationships provide not only role models for behavior, but also emotional security, communication skills, and a sense of identity. To sum this chapter up, Without relationships and opportunities to observe and interact with others, children cannot acquire the full range of human behaviors and psychological capacities. These insights underscore why nurturing, supportive relationships in childhood are critical for healthy development, and why environments rich in positive role models shape not only how we act, but also who we become. Another interesting example of the importance of caregiving and companionship was given by rhesus monkeys, which were studied by an American psychologist Harlow in the 1950s and 60s. He separated infant rhesus monkeys from their mothers and gave them two artificial surrogate mothers they could choose from. One was made of wire but provided milk, so there was no comfort and security from that mother, but there was food. The other was made of soft cloth but gave no food. Harlow then studied which surrogate mother the infants preferred, so with which mom did infants spend the most time, and a very logical and instinctual opinion would probably be that the infants preferred the mom who fed them. After all, food is one of the main needs for every living being. But what Harlow found was the opposite, which is still one of the most interesting, surprising, and important findings in psychology. He discovered that the monkeys spent far more time clinging to the cloth mother, even though the wire mother provided nourishment, showing that comfort and emotional security are more important than just nourishment. His findings challenged the then dominant behaviorist view that attachment forms only because mother provides food, so just because she satisfies biological needs. Harlow also studied the effects of social isolation on monkeys, showing that those deprived of social interaction in early life developed severe emotional and behavioral disturbances. So, in summary, Harlow proved that comfort, warmth, and emotional security are more important for attachment than just meeting basic physical needs, and thus that relationships are rooted in emotional bonding, not only survival necessities. We cannot talk about the importance of relationships without mentioning Bowlby's attachment theory. That is a topic of its own for a whole new video, but now I just want to mention it briefly as another good argument. Bowlby described attachment as the deep emotional connection that forms between an infant and their primary caregiver. But why do we even form those bonds with our caregivers? This bond increases survival chances by keeping the infant close to the caregiver for protection, food, and comfort. The caregiver provides a secure base, allowing the child to feel safe enough to explore the world and return for comfort when needed. Early attachments shape expectations about relationships later in life, how we give and receive love, trust others, and handle closeness. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video or the goose will find you. If you stayed to the very end of the video, please write in the comments which chapter did you find the most interesting, and we might expand on that topic in one of our next videos. Thank you for your attention. Until the next video, stay mindful.